Today's day 4 of Unit 7, our unit on factoring. Here are the answers to the homework from the last lesson, factoring trinomials. Okay, there's all the way to 12. I'm just going to do this quick so you guys can pause it if you want, while you are doing that. Okay, and if you notice, so on the sides I didn't write the product sum tables, I just did so what adds and multiplies, and then I wrote the final answers. So most of you will probably have a couple different things, or maybe you're getting good at this and just go right to the final answer. So today we are going to continue factoring trinomials with a similar way, but now we're going to use examples where the leading coefficient is greater than 1. So for example, 2x squared plus 5x plus 2. Remember, the leading coefficient is attached to the variable with the highest exponent. We are pretty much focusing mainly on quadratics, which has the highest degree of a squared. And if you notice, so on day 1 of this unit, we always look to see if we have a GCF. Well, if we have 2x squared, 5x, and 2, there is no GCF of those numbers. I know that there's two 2's, but that 5 is not divisible by 2, so you cannot factor out a 2. But please make sure you always look for that first. So if you cannot, I'm going to teach you a method called grouping today. Alright, so on the side of your paper you do have the steps. So I'm gonna, as I read the steps, I'm gonna do that step, okay? And what I'm gonna also do is I'm going to do a little bit on the side as well. I call this the X method, or the AC method rather. So what I do is I draw this X on my paper. So what you're trying to do is when you are factoring by grouping, you're trying to change this X value. Think of when we FOIL, okay? You always FOIL and get 4 terms, but then you usually combine them and only get a trinomial. So what I want you to think of as grouping actually pulls out that step. So we're going to find the product of A and C. So what that means is you're just going to multiply. So this is A and this is C, okay? So when you multiply A and C, that we're going to put up top, okay? Then you're going to rewrite the middle term as a sum of 2 terms that add to that product. So basically what you do in factoring, but now instead of making it multiply to just C, we need them to multiply to A times C. Okay, normally this is a 1, so that's why we don't usually factor in the A. Okay, so I want it to multiply to 4 and add to 5. So hopefully in your head you're thinking plus 1 and a positive 4. So the reason why I draw a big X is because now these, okay, these are our new factors that we're going to put in instead of that 5. So these become our X's. Okay, so my new polynomial is going to be 5x squared plus x plus 4x plus 2. So all I did was I took the 5x and I separated it into 2 factors. Now you can't just pick whatever you want. It has to work just like we have done in the past. Okay, again, this is going to take some practice, so bear with me. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to make 2 groups. So you are going to put parentheses around the first 2 and then put parentheses around the second 2. Okay? Now within these 2 parentheses we are going to find a GCF. So I have a 2x squared and an x. So I can take out an x, and what I'm left with inside is 2x plus 1. Now of this one I can take out a 2. So what I'm left with, again, is 2x plus 1. When you are factoring, this is what you are trying to go for. Because now, to rewrite this, I basically take out a GCF. They both have 2x plus 1, so that becomes separate. And then the leftover is an x plus 2, so that goes in the other parentheses, and that is actually my final answer. That is my solution. So if I were to go backwards, this would be 2x squared plus 4x plus x plus 2, sorry. Okay, which as you can see is that step we already did. Okay, and then if you further did that, okay, so that does get us back to where we started. Okay, so let's do another example of that. Okay, no, that's not easy. Totally understand that. So let's try this again. So again, on the side of my paper, I always draw an X. That reminds me I need to separate this. So I need to multiply 3 and 8, and that gets me 24. And then the 10 goes on the bottom. So in my head, I'm thinking what multiplies to 24 and adds to 10. Hopefully you're thinking 6 and 4. So now we rewrite this as 3x squared plus 6x plus 4x plus 8. And then you factor by grouping. So I have a 3 and a 6, so I can pull out a 3. I have an x squared and an x, so I can take one of those x's out. Now remember, you're basically dividing, so if I divide a 3 by a 3, I get a 1. X squared by x, I'm left with just 1x. And then over here, the x's cancel. 6 divided by 3 rather is a 2. Now look over here, so there's no x's in the second term, so I can just pull out a 4. So I'm left with x plus 2 again. Okay, here's my GCF, so I take that out, and then whatever's left over goes in the other set of parentheses. Okay, another method you guys can do, you always know that if you have a trinomial, you're always going to end up with 2 binomials. So if you can guess and check, you can try guessing and checking. That's another way to do this, but again, that's probably not going to be the easiest method. Okay. So now with this one, I'm still going to do this. Okay. So with this one, what I notice actually is I have all factors of 2. So what I'm going to do first is I'm actually going to pull this out. Okay, so I'm going to factor out. Maybe that'll make my life easier. Okay, so in my final answer, I'm going to have a 2. So I'm going to throw that down there like already, so I don't have to worry about that. So now in my x, I'm just going to do 1 times 10. So I need something to multiply to 10 and add to 11. So that would be 10 and 1. Okay, so again, you can leave that 2 out front and then do everything else inside. So I'm going to get x squared plus 10x plus x plus 10. Okay, I'll put those into 2 separate ones. Okay, so again, keep that 2 out front. So I get just an x I can take out of that one. So x plus 10. And I actually can't take anything out of here. So if you can't take anything out, put it plus 1, or else you're going to forget what to put there. Okay? And then again, whatever's in parentheses is your GCF that goes in 1. And then whatever's left over goes in the other. Hopefully this is getting a little easy. Okay, 4 times 6 is 24, and we need that to add up to a negative 11. Okay, so if you think, so in order for it to be positive but add up to a negative, we need 2 negatives. All right, and then I'm thinking 8 and 3. That should work. So now we replace the 11x with these 2 guys. So minus 8x minus 3x plus 6. Okay, so what I'm going to do is something like this. So I get a 4 and an 8, so I can take out a 4. I can take one of the x's out, both, and left over I have x minus 2. Then over here, okay, so then what I want you to notice, I wanted to give an example. Sorry, that slid down a little bit. I wanted to give you an example of a negative, okay? So if you have a negative out front, what I'm going to say is pull out a negative, actually. So if I take out a negative 3, I'm left with x minus 2, which is what I'm having here, okay? So if you think, so really I divided by a negative 3 on both. So if you do 6 divided by negative 3, that gets you a negative 2. Okay, so then whatever I'm left over with goes in my parentheses. And that's your final answer. Okay, so for page 11, there's 8 questions, so you can work with a partner or by yourself, and we will go over that all together at the end of class.